Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Service Commission. It is Tuesday, August 30th, 2:41 p.m. We are here for an interview for a consultant in docket number 2022-105-E. It's for a consultant related to the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan to be filed by South Carolina Public Service Authority, also known as Santee Cooper. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Jay Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Caston, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. And with us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Thomas. We are here now for the interview with London Economics International. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Goulding.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you again, and I believe you have Ms. Fagan with you. Is that correct?
I do, yes. I'm pleased to have Marie Fagan with me today.
And for the record, would you state your name for the court reporter for us?
Yes, my name is A.J. Goulding.
Okay. Mr. Goulding, thank you for submitting a response to the RFP. Do you want to make an opening statement?
I think that the only opening statement that I would make is that we are honored to have the opportunity to speak with all of you again, and to note that while there are a number of qualified firms out there, we believe that we are well qualified for this potential engagement, given prior experience working in South Carolina, our overall modeling capabilities, knowledge of how the sector is evolving, and the fact that we are resource agnostic. We're not advocates. We look at the numbers and the policies of the state and look towards, I believe the language is the most cost-effective and lowest ratepayer risk resource portfolio that is presented in an IRP. So I would also note that my colleague, Marie, has some long experience working on similar tasks in Louisiana and Mississippi, and that she also would be available to make a large contribution to the project.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Goulding and Ms. Fagan? Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Chair Belser, thank you. Mr. Goulding, good to see you again, and Ms. Fagan, good to meet you. I have a number of questions, none of which will be a surprise to you, but I'm going to dive in so we can move on to perhaps some more interesting ones. Have you ever appeared before the Public Service Commission of South Carolina as a party or as a consultant, witness, or representative for a party? If so, which party and what docket? And I'll say, we're all well aware of the work that you have done for us as an independent consultant. So perhaps beyond that.
Okay, so I won't pull up the docket number for that proceeding or for the forthcoming avoided cost proceeding. Other than that, we have not appeared. Marie, or anyone from my firm has not appeared before the commission on behalf of any other client in any proceeding.
Okay. And same question, but this time related to the Public Service Authority and Santee Cooper or any of its affiliates. If so, when, where, and what were the terms and the monetary amounts of contracts?
No one from our firm has appeared for Santee Cooper or worked with Santee Cooper on any project.
Thank you. What about your employees, associates, contractors, or partners? Have they ever been retained to represent Santee Cooper or investor-owned public utilities in South Carolina? If so, when, where, and what were the monetary amounts?
I'm not aware of any employee that has appeared before the commission or has worked on behalf of Santee Cooper. I'm not aware that any contractor that's ever been employed by us has. I can't swear to that, of course, but we also aren't going to be using any contractors were we to be successful in this engagement.
You may have just answered it, but I didn't hear it. What about independent public utilities? Investor-owned.
My apologies. With regards to independent public utilities, we have not appeared in South Carolina on behalf of any independent public utilities. In the state of Ohio, where Maria's worked on a number of utility audits, the utility is technically the entity that pays for the audit, but does not direct it. And in that case, some of those audits would have been of operations of Duke, Ohio.
Thank you. And now this relates to members of your immediate family, partners, associates. Do you own bonds that are invested in Santee Cooper? If so, tell us more.
I'm not aware of, I can say definitively that I personally, and to this my knowledge, my spouse, do not own such bonds. I'm not aware of anybody in my family that would, nor of any of my employees. And Maria, I'll let you answer on your behalf.
Well, likewise, I also do not own any bonds in any of the utilities that we'd be looking at, Santee Cooper, or any, actually.
Okay, thank you. Just checking our list. Do you have any reason to believe that you cannot serve as in a fair, impartial, or independent consultant for this docket?
No, I have no reason to believe that I or the firm cannot serve as a fair and independent consultant.
Would you like to amplify that and tell us more about and convince us why that is the case?
Sure. So first of all, we started each engagement fresh. We, to the extent that any person can, try to start based on the evidence on the docket. We also look towards the scope of a particular engagement. We look at the underlying policies and parameters. And our goal ultimately is to provide sound and reasoned evidence. Our goal is not to be popular. It's not to follow a fad. It's to respond to the scope to the best of our ability with evidence and reasoned opinions. So to us, each engagement is new. And in addition, I personally don't care what other clients' views may be, or what the consequences are of taking a particular opinion. If that opinion is well-reasoned, consistent with the scope, consistent with the prevailing law and state policies, then that is what we're going to say. I am proud to say that there are times when we've had clients that wanted to put words into our mouths, and we didn't feel that was consistent with our professional ethics, that we did not do that. So we're not the people you turn to when you're looking to advocate a particular position, and we're not the people that you turn to when you're looking for somebody to parrot a particular viewpoint.
Thank you very much. Do you have any ongoing business dealings with the parties in this docket? If so, what are they? Do you have any ongoing business dealings with the parties in docket 2022-105E? And if so, what are they? Notice that the Public Service Commission does not know all of the parties that may intervene in this particular docket. The interveners thus far are the Office of Regulatory Staff and the Department of Consumer Affairs, but some interveners that are likely to posit themselves in this docket are the electric cooperatives, Central Electric Cooperative, the clean energy and environmental groups such as the Carolinas Clean Energy Business Association, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the Coastal Conservation League, Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, Vote Solar, and individual solar companies, as well as large energy users. Those are some of the many that may choose to intervene. So the question, going back to it, after giving you those examples, do you have any ongoing business dealings with the parties in this docket and the likely parties in the docket?
No, we do not. The only name that jumped out at me there, because I think that we have had engagements with them in the past, and I'd have to check whether it's been within the past 2 years, is we may have done some work for NRDC, but I'd have to check on that and get back to you.
Please do. They have intervened in a couple of recent dockets, so that would be helpful.
Certainly.
Are you currently in any negotiations to represent any of the parties before the Public Service Commission or the Public Utilities Commission? If so, what are they?
No, we are not in negotiations with anyone that would be appearing before the commission.
Okay. Do you hold any licenses, degrees, and designations or credentials that qualify you as an expert, and what are they, in electric utility matters? And if so, when and where did you earn the credentials, and have you lost or had any of those credentials rescinded?
Thank you. I have a master's degree in international affairs, international business from Columbia University. I have served as now adjunct associate. I was adjunct assistant professor at Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs, where I teach electricity markets. I have been doing that for I believe more than 15 years. And so while that may not count as a certificate, I believe it does demonstrate mastery of the relevant subject.
Ms. Fagan, do you want to answer that question as well?
Yes, Commissioner. Yes, I have a PhD in economics from the American University in Washington, D.C. The subject matter of my research was actually upstream oil and gas. Started my career as a petroleum economist. But over the past 30 plus years that I've been a petroleum economist, I've spent probably the past 10 to 12 years looking at electricity markets, whether liberalized electricity markets, ISO activities, market design, and in regulated markets, a number of types of audits of utility management practices, various kinds of riders, fuel adjustment clauses, and that type of thing.
Thank you. Are either of you and London Economics International a member of a utility-related trade group or organization? If so, what are they? What's the mission? Are they for-profit, nonprofit?
So Marie can augment The ones that I'm aware of that we're members of are all nonprofit. We belong to the organizations that represent mostly generators in Ontario and Alberta. And we're also a member of the, I believe they're called the New England or Northeast Commerce Association, NECA, which has a pretty broad membership across New England of um, uh, anybody that's interested in energy and electricity policy. So those are the organizations that I'm aware of. From time to time, we may take membership in things like Marie, in Texas, I believe it's the Gulf States.
Yeah, the Gulf Coast Power Association.
Okay.
I don't know that we're current members, but from time to time we participate in that.
Yeah. So all of those are nonprofit organizations.
Thank you. Will you be able to do a final proof of conflicts check for your firm? I believe it's due this Friday.
Yes.
Okay. If you were hired as a consultant, are you willing to abstain from unauthorized ex parte contact with current or future parties in this docket?
Yes.
Are you aware of any reason that you or your firm should not serve as an independent expert in this docket?
No.
Talk to us some about your schedule for completion of the project.
Yes, I think that that is somewhat dependent, of course, on the filing date and also on the subsequent calendar in terms of the submissions. But from our perspective, we would say, and this is something that we would work within whatever calendar the commission set. But I would say, from the date of filing, we'd probably look to ideally have about 4 weeks to digest everything. Then as more material comes available on the docket, we'd probably be looking for, ideally, you'd always like to have at least a week after other groups have filed their responses in order to digest them all. And then ideally we'd have, let's say, another month to develop a report. Now, we recognize that we don't always have the luxury of setting the schedule the way that we would like, but we're confident that we could work within the schedules and timelines that would be set by the commission.
We're certainly working to provide the time to respond as compared to the first situation that you found yourself in with us. We're working in advance to prevent that. What are your estimated hours per task and estimated total labor hours?
That's an excellent question, and we have done some calculations. If you just give me a second to find them in the document. So we've estimated a total across the project of about 370. I probably want to give myself a little bit of a buffer, so let's say 400 hours total. I think is probably about what we would need. Obviously we're putting in a bit of a buffer in case there's more oral testimony than expected, or there end up being substantially more interveners. It does depend a little bit on on the interveners. Now, we had divided the tasks into a review of the 2023 IRP and supporting documentation. We'd set aside about 60 hours total for that. Identifying data needs and collecting data through discovery requests. We set aside about 60 hours for that. That could be less, could be more, but I think that's a reasonable middle point. Performing independent analysis and review, we set aside 140 hours total. Preparing the written report summarizing the findings, we put in around 60 hours. And then for the oral testimony, if needed, this is inclusive of prep time, because my anticipation would be that the actual time on the stand would be somewhere between 8 and 20 hours. But so we've included a total of 50 hours for providing oral testimony, but that is inclusive of preparation.
And what is your total estimated cost? And you don't have to do that publicly.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. We do have an estimate. We're happy to share it with you, but I believe this is a public forum, so we'd appreciate if we could provide that to you subsequent to this.
That's absolutely fine. I think that doing that by Friday would be most helpful.
Great.
3 p.m. on Friday.
Of course.
By 3 p.m. is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Relative to the requirements of South Carolina Code Section 58-38-40, what information does the Commission need to receive from your firm, if any?
So our starting point for this question, and if we're off track on this, please do let us know. We looked at the criteria for reviewing and evaluating the IRP itself. And so we interpreted that question as, what information do you need in the context of the engagement rather than prior to the engagement? Am I interpreting that correct?
I'm gonna stay vague on that. If somebody else wants to jump in, they can.
Mr. Goulding, this is Commissioner Belser, and I think I would phrase that as what information do you need to conduct your analysis during the engagement? And I'm sure that all information you need as soon as you can get it.
So thank you for that clarification. So I think that for us, what we would be hoping for in an IRP submission would be confidence that multiple scenarios were considered. We'd need to understand what the assumptions were that went into those scenarios, over what time period were they conducted. There's some real challenges in doing an IRP because we all know that the world doesn't always behave in predictable ways. And so you have a trade-off between, let's say, something that's higher cost and maintains optionality on behalf of customers, and something that is low cost, but if the world goes in a different direction, then suddenly customers will be harmed. And so the starting point for us would be a fulsome submission that provided descriptions of scenarios, descriptions of resource bundles, and descriptions of key assumptions, because the more information that's there, the better we're able to assess whether the resource portfolio that's been recommended is actually consistent with being cost effective and lowest risk. Recognizing that there's some subjectivity that goes into both of those. But the starting point is a full transparent application. Now, when we dig into that, some follow-on questions, the types of things that are very important in an IRP are, all right, well, you've got your existing portfolio. What do we need to do to either sustain that or identify the appropriate point for replacement of a particular asset? And so having a strong understanding of how Santee Cooper has done that analysis is going to be a key part of the review of the IRP. I think another area that is that can be overlooked in IRPs is having an understanding of, on the one hand, demand response, and on the other, how robust the load forecasts are, and whether the assessment of the demand response resource base is actually consistent with the load forecasts that are embedded in the scenarios. So that's an area that we would probably be looking into quite closely. Again, acknowledging that with load forecasting, there is certainly great belief that the future doesn't look like the past. And so without talking about whether these transitions are good or bad, acknowledging that there's certainly one view about increasing electrification, how that impacts load, that at least has to be considered. You might have good reasons for saying, you know what, we don't believe that that's consistent with the way that load is going to evolve in our service territory, but you have to look at it. So in terms of thinking about what are the building blocks of the IRP, well, there's your existing resource portfolio and the parameters about when it's going to be retired. There are your outlooks for load, for what you think you're going to need in the future. There's your fuel cost inputs, and as well, then there are the new resource bundles that you're looking at and how economic those are, and how do you balance those with a participation in the wholesale market, if at all. So this is not intended to be an exhaustive answer, but these are things that I'm absolutely certain that we would be digging into.
Thank you. Back to a more perfunctory yes or no. Do you or your firm contribute to political action committees? If so, please identify them.
No, we do not.
Okay. Is there anyone who currently works for your organization who worked for a public utility or for Santee Cooper in the past?
No one that worked for Santee Cooper, and I believe in our organization, people go the other direction. So we don't have anybody who, to the best of my recollection, has previously worked for a public utility. We have a few that have moved over to them.
Okay. So you have a few that have moved over to them.
Yes, I should add we have a few that have moved to regulators as well. So.
And is there anybody in your associated with your organization who has an affiliation with a public utility company or with Santee Cooper? So just a broader version of the first question.
Yeah, I struggled with that one just because of the definition of affiliated. So there's certainly nobody that has a relationship with Santee Cooper. in terms of any public utility anywhere, depending on how you define affiliated. I don't believe so. You know, we have some senior advisors. You know, for example, we have a senior advisor who we use from time to time who sits on the board of PJM. But obviously that's not a public utility company. I don't believe, to the best of my knowledge, we have nobody who is affiliated with us who is affiliated with a public utilities company. I don't believe we've got anybody who's a director or anything along those lines.
Thank you. And are you associated with any matters pending before the Public Service Commission of South Carolina now or in the past, other than the obvious ones that we're aware of?
No.
Meaning the two where we've selected you as the consultant?
No, we're not involved in any other matters that are before or could come before the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Goulding and Ms. Fagan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners? Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Goulding.
Good afternoon.
And I had your name right in front of me, and I've lost it. Dr. Fagan. Dr. Fagan. I'm sorry.
Dr. Fagan. Yes.
I wrote it down so I would have it, and I can't find the paper. Thank you. Mr. Goulding, in I think your opening statement, you'd mentioned, I think it was relative to LEI, it could have been you, but I think LEI, that you were resource agnostic, and that just kind of caught my ear. What did you mean by that? I think I know, but.
Yeah, so I think that what we are looking for is the least cost solution given the parameters that are set forth. And so, you know, I always think about utility planning as being a constrained optimization problem. You set out what your constraints are. Usually those are, you know, cost, willingness to pay, available resources. These are the things that you're looking at. Now, if a state's policy is to pursue a particular resource mix, then it's our job to take that state policy into account. But in a particular engagement, it's not our job to come in with a preconceived notion about what an appropriate resource mix is. So when I say that we're agnostic, what I mean is we don't come in and say, you know, the right thing to do is to have X kind of resource. Instead, we come in and say, okay, well, what does state law say? What are state's policies? You know, we, of course, will look at anything that's relevant from the federal perspective. But we're not here to say that, you know, coal is good or bad, or solar is good or bad. What we're looking for is the customer needs a certain amount of power. That power needs to be at a particular quality. The state has particular policy objectives. Given those constraints, what is the least cost way to meet the customer's needs? So that's what I mean when I say resource agnostic.
Understand. And I was trying to discern if in some of the responses to Commissioner Carolee Williams, if you kind of answered this, but I'll just ask it because I wasn't sure. Would LEI's IRP evaluation be based on the portfolios that Santee Cooper has selected?
So I think that would be the starting point. If we felt there was something obvious that should have been in the portfolio but isn't, I think we'd start with some interrogatories, asking more about it. And, ultimately, if we weren't convinced of some of the answers, I think, what we always want to do is have modeling be internally consistent, right? For folks to use the same tool to evaluate multiple portfolios. So if we had another portfolio and the answers to the interrogatories were not convincing to us as to why that portfolio hadn't been assessed, then if the process allowed, we might ask that an additional portfolio be tested following their process. And then, as we've noted, we tend to try and do a sanity check around the modeling that the applicant does. We would then try to demonstrate, hopefully that what would happen is, we go out, think about this independently, and we say, yeah, okay, this makes sense. If it doesn't, and if ultimately the process doesn't allow, or the utility was unwilling to consider a portfolio that we thought was appropriate, then we'd have to consider how we address that in our report, whether we then make a recommendation that this alternative portfolio be considered, and then we'd have to provide, a pretty extensive reasoning as to why it was not. I think that the nature of IRPs is, if somebody shows up and says they've only assessed, 2 or 3 portfolios, they probably haven't done a good job. But you also don't need to do 20 portfolios. I mean, ultimately, the marginal value of incremental information falls. And so we're not going to recommend another portfolio just to try and make ourselves look smart. We hope that the applicant will put forth a kind of a robust set of portfolios that would be assessed. If there's something missing, we would highlight it in the interrogatories. And ultimately, if we weren't satisfied, then we would have to consider how we dealt with that in the report and what kind of supporting evidence we provided.
So what I think I heard, based on that response and the previous one, would be that if Santee Cooper, let's say, is considering looking at 4 portfolios, you would start there, and if you felt or believed they did not cover everything adequate or reasonable options that should have been included, you would recommend that they do those, or that additional 1 or 2, relative to, how did you say it, reliability and least cost and state policies. Did I put too much in that? Is that what you were saying, or did I just totally?
No, I think that that's exactly correct, right? We're not going to ask for an additional run just for the sake of doing it. We get back to this question of the most cost-effective and lowest ratepayer risk. And if we really think there's something missing, then we would go back and ask about it. But ultimately, we are looking at the balance of cost and risk. If they put in 4, I would my initial take is that 4 might be just a little bit on the light side, but you know, still might be reasonable when we look at them. But you know, ultimately, you know, the portfolios can be varied in terms of the resources. They can be varied in terms of the timing, and you know, then the portfolios themselves have to be tested against you know, a variety of load and fuel cost projections. So before we went back and said, oh, you must do another one, we want to make absolutely certain that there really was something missing.
Then along those lines, is there some magic number? What do you think is a more reasonable number of portfolios?
Well, and Maria, please feel free to chime in. There is no magic number, as with most of these things. And I would say, you know, I'd feel more comfortable with 6 than with 4. Do I have any scientific reason for that? No. But do I think that it gives you a better opportunity of being able to address some of the nuances that come, particularly as we, in the sector as a whole, struggle with things like integrating intermittent resources? Yeah, I think that for me, you know, 4 would probably be the minimum that I'd want to look at, and you know, I'd feel more comfortable with 6. But it also depends on what the portfolios are being tested against, because you know, it's quite clear that you end up with a matrix where, let's say that we stick with 4 portfolios, but then we've got 3 different input cost scenarios and 3 different load scenarios, and potential variation in capital costs. And it doesn't take very much until you're looking at a very complicated matrix. So I don't advocate for, you know, some utilities, you know, I've seen people do, you know, 20 portfolios. My view is that tends to obfuscate more than it tends to clarify. Marie, what are your views on this topic?
I was about to say the same thing with respect to the parameters that you're testing the portfolios against, just because the more uncertain the future might be, whether it's, you want a wide enough variation, for example, on what might happen with load. You want to understand what might happen with you know, net load, let's say, with more renewables coming on the system. So when you have that kind of uncertainty, you want to set up portfolios that help define kind of the boundary conditions, right? But portfolios that aren't just incrementally different from one another, but you want to test whether a portfolio is robust across a number of different futures. So you need to have enough difference in the portfolios and enough difference in the way you're thinking about, you know, how the future could unfold to be confident that you're getting, because no one can guess what the future is, right? It's not a question of getting the what's the highest probability scenario, because the world just unfortunately doesn't work like that. So I think the more uncertainty in the assumptions that are driving, the more you want, maybe not 20 portfolios, but you want ones that look different enough from one another that when you compare those, you get insights as to, you know, what would be the optimum as far as low cost, reliability, and prudence, et cetera.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. 3 more questions. Model. Do you guys model in-house?
Yes. Now, our approach almost certainly is different than Santee Cooper's in the sense that we start with a long-term dispatch model and add and subtract resources based on economics. And our approach is iterative. I can't speak to what tools Santee Cooper is going to use, but the modeling that we do is capable of replicating key aspects of whatever analysis they present.
And is that a LEI's proprietary model, or is it a off the shelf?
It's proprietary.
Okay. Finally, how many people do you estimate for your team on this project?
I believe we've named 5, partially to provide a degree of depth. Ultimately, if you put too many people on the team, it tends to become inefficient. But we also want to have some backup and some ability to have folks that if we need to dive into something, I'm just making things up here, like more recent estimates of the trajectory for battery storage costs or something like that, having a smart junior person on the team helps with that. So I would say the core team will end up being myself, Marie, plus 3 other people. And we've put some examples of named resources in the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Goulden and Dr. Fagan, and no more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioners? Commissioners, any other questions? Mr. Goulding and Dr. Fagan, if y'all could provide the final conflicts check letter, and I believe there was another document that Commissioner Williams asked for. The deadline is 3 p.m. on Friday, September 2nd. And I'd like to thank you for your submittal, for your patience with our questions today, and just wish you a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.